Hello, Uttar Pradesh. It's India's politically most important state. It's got 200 million people. In fact, it's so big that if it were a country, it would be the world's fifth largest. Uttar Pradesh goes to polls tomorrow, and we're here in the special Scroll.in program to discuss what voters are thinking, what politicians are promising them, and what the Uttar Pradesh elections will mean for Indian politics going forward. You're joining me, Shoaib Daniel, as well as Arunab Saikia, Scroll.in's reporter who's been crisscrossing Uttar Pradesh all over to try and gauge voter sentiment, to try and understand problems on the ground. And he's going to try and distill all of his insights and all of his learnings into this special 1 hour show on Scroll.in. Before we start, we'd like to drop in a quick request. Uh, you know, uh, uh, we always complain about the media, the fact that media doesn't hold government to account, and we at Scroll try and do that. We try and hold the government to account. We try and report from the ground, and we can't do that without the support of people such as yourself. So I would urge you to go to scroll.in/contribute and pay whatever you're comfortable with to keep
We try and
the
report from
media
the
going.
ground, and we can't.
Okay, bit of an audio issue. Okay, hi Arunab.
Hi, Shweb.
Arunab's joining us from Delhi, and I'm in Calcutta, and we're going to jump right into this discussion. Since you're in Delhi, Arunab, I'm going to start with the farmer protests that occurred in Delhi all of last year. They shook up Indian politics. In the end, Mr. Modi had to withdraw the farm laws. And really, one of the epicenters of that protest, in many ways, the people who provided the protesters, people who provided, help to protesters at the borders of Delhi, was Western UP. Uh, what impact do you think? And it's West UP that goes to polls tomorrow on the 10th. What impact do you think the farmer protests will have uh, on the UP elections?
Right. As it so happens, I was in Bagpat only last week, and over the last, in the last week of January. Uh, and I had, I had actually gone to Bagpat in November too. As readers of the scroll would perhaps know that we've been tracking 5 districts across the state. 5 districts which the BJP, swept in 2017, but had practically no presence before that. The idea was to essentially see if the party had managed to strengthen its roots, or as a lot of people say that it was a victory, it was a Modi wave victory, and that's how it should be looked at. So Baghpat, I suppose, is particularly fascinating, because Baghpat is what they call the capital of Jat politics, right? Owing to the fact that
Mhm.
Chaudhry Charan Singh, did most of his, contested in elections from Baghpat. And as you just mentioned, I mean, the protest kind of got a fresh lease of life after, Ajit Singh, who was then the chief of the Rashtriya Lok Dal, a very Jat-centric party, backed the protesters. The protest became, it really spread. It was in a way an inflection point for the protest.
Mhm.
So, one must remember that RLD had a terrible time in the 2017-19 elections, right? In the 70 elections, it was reduced to one seat, and in 2019, both Jayant Chaudhary and Ajit Singh, lost the elections, right? Uh, but that was largely because of the 2013 Muzaffarnagar riots, which was in a way instrumental to the BJP's rise in Uttar Pradesh and perhaps the whole of North India, right? So
Mhm.
uh, you know, at that, and what the riots had essentially done, was basically, led to disintegration of the RLD's, core voter groups, the Jats and the Muslims, both agrarian communities, who shared a very symbiotic relationship in that part of Uttar Pradesh, despite, whatever differences. So that completely shattered that vote bank, and the beneficiary was the BJP. I mean, as a fact-finding report from that time put it very, concisely that that the voter was left with no choice but to, either but to go with the BJP or go with the some of the party, go with a Muslim centric party, so seemingly Muslim centric party, or a Hindu centric party like the BJP, and there the RLD was completely lost. What had also happened was a lot of their, lot of Muslim politicians, stalwart Muslim politicians from that part of the region who'd been with the RLD forever, for last, ever since the Congress, ever
Mhm.
since the decline, they had been the RLD. So, but a lot of those people happened to not contest elections from RLD in 2017 because, because they thought that the electorate was not at that point ready for a patch up, right? So, but as it so happens, a lot of those candidates have come back to the RLD for the 2022 elections. And as people who following the elections would know, there's also a tie-up between the Rashtriya Dal and the Samajwadi Party. The idea of the coalition is to basically, coalesce Hindu and coalesce Jat and Muslim votes. Again, the traditional vote bank of the Rashtriya Lok Dal. Is it happening? It's a difficult question. What we do know for a fact is that a lot of is that the RLD emerged quite strong out of the protests. Alongside the protests, apart from mobilizing resources for the protests, they also organized something called Bhaichara Sammelans, which is essentially brotherhood, congregation, bringing together Muslim and Jat farmers. So. So everybody expected, the RLD to kind of, whatever, get back its older vote bank. That has happened to a certain extent. A lot of, the communal frenzy, if I could put it that way, has subsided to a certain extent. But but one must remember that the farm protests in UP weren't essentially because of the three laws. Their grievance. I mean, they did also kind of put their weight behind the three laws, but the primary grievance was the fact that sugarcane, the payment for sugarcane, which is the primary crop in that part of the Pradesh, hadn't been
Mm.
made. And there wasn't timely payment for sugarcane, or enough hike in the sugarcane rates the government provided. So days after I mean days after the Modi government withdrew the farm laws, it also increased. It also promised to increase the price of sugarcane, and it also cleared a lot of pending dues.
Mhm.
So that definitely helped offset some of the anger, because one must understand that unlike the Sikh protesters in Punjab, the Jats did not as such have an ideological antagonism towards the BJP, right? Because uh, so, and the thought and my reporting, in West UP, I've spent a lot of time in West UP. Perhaps like any Delhi reporter, I probably spend more time in West UP than other parts of the state, unfortunately. But what is also very apparent is that the riots still continue to animate sentiments of a large section of Jat farmers. In November, I sensed a very I sensed Jat farmers grappling with this identity crisis of sorts. Were they primarily farmers, or were they primarily Hindus? Because a lot of them were apprehensive that if the Samajwadi Party comes back to power, this is a long running sentiment that that Muslims, their Muslim neighbors feel emboldened under the Samajwadi Party. So that was the dilemma they had to contend with, and they have been contending with for a while now. That despite their despite their problems and all sorts of grievances with the BJP, which is seen as a party not very kind to farmers in general. So it's going to be it was, as I sensed in November, going to be a battle between these two identities. When I went back to Bagpat this time, I saw this allegiances hardening, in a way, So in between, something very important, something very landmark had happened. The Samajwadi Party and the Rashtriya Lok Dal formalized the alliance, right? Because they so, while the idea of it, as I said, was to bring together Muslim and Jat voters, well, that probably will happen to a certain extent, but it also stands a risk of alienating a section of Jat voters, right? Because because the Samajwadi Party, they feel is biased, or because they feel that the Samajwadi Party government didn't take the necessary action they should have to the uncertain riots. In fact, shielded Muslims during the riots. So the impact of the farm protests, there will obviously be some impact of farm protests. It's playing out. But there are multiple other factors and multiple other considerations in West UP. Also, one must remember that while the Jats and Muslims, are a significant number, there are also a lot of non-Yadav, non-Jat Hindu communities in Western Uttar Pradesh, right? The Tyagis, the Sainis, my sense from the ground was that most people belonging to these communities are still firmly putting their weight behind the BJP. That is for two reasons. One is obviously the same reasons where a Jats fear an alliance with Saudi Party. The fact that they think that Muslims, their Muslim neighbors will get involved. But there's another reason here, which is actually a historic reason. The other communities feel that an RLD government, or the RLD in power, that would lead to their marginalization, because RLD is seen to represent primarily Jat interests. It's always been like that, for a while now. So that is another factor that is going to be difficult for the SP RLD combined, to endure itself to non-Jat Hindu voters. So there are multiple factors. There's a lot of push and pull there. So, but having said that, it probably will still in a lot of districts like, say, Shamli, Bagpat, Muzaffarnagar, the three Jat, the Jat heartland, right? It will boil down to the Jat votes, essentially. Will decide the winners.
Mm. In fact, the Jat conundrum is that while they might ideologically bend towards the BJP, I think it's only Muslims that, in many ways, vote for a Jat candidate. Other castes are quite antagonistic, right?
That's what I said. Because
Yeah.
I mean, that's a historic fact. That predates the riots to it, actually. Because the non-Jat Hindus have not traditionally voted for the Rashtriya Lok Dal or its various predecessors like the Bharatiya Kamgar Party, Kisan Kamgar Party. Apart from probably back in Charan Singh's days, where he had a much larger appeal.
Okay, yeah. And we'll sort of be going through this fault line of
Right.
material issues versus maybe identity, right,
Right.
through this show. One thing I'd like to remind viewers is we're going to have a short Q&A at the end of this session. So if you have any questions for Ornab, just drop them in at the comment section, and hopefully there's enough time. We'll get Ornab to answer them. Uh, the second thing is, so I mean, you brought up sugarcane, and this is almost like a perennial West UP Doab problem. But honestly, it's just not that. Material issues are really deep in Uttar Pradesh. They include, farmer distress all through, right from West UP to Purvanchal. They include unemployment. They include Mehngai, inflation. So, in your conversations that you've had through the state with voters, what is the sense that you've got in terms of what is their material anger against the BJP government right now in power?
Absolutely, there's a lot of material anger against the BJP. As you said, it's not just the sugarcane, right? Sugarcane is in fact an enduring issue. Uh, something that kind of went under the radar, mostly, was there was a massive shortage of, DAP, diammonium phosphate, fertilizer, very crucial, it's a pre-sowing, fertilizer. And there was massive shortage, and people were paying like 3 times the rate, queuing up at 5 in the morning, so and that was something that actually came up a lot in conversations, but for some reason kind of went under the radar, in media, in English media discourse at least.
Oh.
And apart from that,
This is the
obviously,
China factor on the Uttar Pradesh election. I mean, this is due to the
yeah, I mean,
tension with China, right?
it's probably not just China. I think also the erstwhile Soviet countries, which also produce DAP.
Right,
So
right.
so yeah, there was a supply chain problem, and the government apparently reacted to it late. So there were a lot of teething troubles, with getting this DAP supply chain in place. And the thing with DAP is that you need it at a very particular, at a very specific point of time in the cultivation cycle, right? If you miss that, there's no point. Even urea, for example, for instance, a very basic fertilizer. There has been urea shortage too in the last year or so. So there's a lot of material anger, a lot of material discontentment. But apart from that, the biggest factor, across agrarian Uttar Pradesh, across rural Uttar Pradesh, is the menace of stray cattle. Even the staunchest of BJP supporters will tell you that it is a menace. I mean, you have cows, you have cattle, raiding fields in the middle of the night. This is bitterly cold in North Indian winter this time. So, I've met men, who've spent all their nights, guarding their fields because otherwise 1 hour they, I happened to meet someone who said, he'd gone back for breakfast after spending the entire night, and in that, window of half an hour, half is produced or was destroyed. So that's a huge factor, and I think we should tell our viewers, who probably uninitiated to this, is that stray cattle is not a new problem in North India or in India for that matter, but it excavated this time, the last 5 years in Uttar Pradesh, because Adityanath, the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister, days after coming to power, passed a set of extremely stringent laws, kind of supposedly banning illegal cow slaughter, but for all practical purposes, shutting down all the cattle markets, right? So, and that's a problem across Uttar Pradesh, and that is something the BJP itself. If you talk to BJP leaders, they're concerned about it too. So, so I think in terms of agrarian distress, agrarian problems, cattle probably, stray cattle probably ranks right at the top, and it's an all-encompassing, issue spread across the state of Uttar Pradesh, from Bundelkhand to Purvanchal to West UP, to our, it's everywhere, it's omnipresent, and cows are, I mean, there are cows, and for that matter, it's not just farmers, right? I mean, there have been multiple instances of accidents, of buses, falling down ditches, falling into ditches because of stray cattle randomly, come in the streets, and it's for everyone to see in Uttar Pradesh. Like stray cattle is just everywhere right now. And farmers will tell you that I mean, people who communities were traditionally associated with skinning and things like that would are scared to even take away dead cows. So it's something that animates and dominates, in fact, conversations with farmers all across Uttar Pradesh.
And what are the solutions being discussed? So, I mean, the obviously the big solution is to reallow cow slaughter, which, but of course, that seems to be politically untenable. So, what are the solutions being discussed for this?
Yeah, why it does sound politically untenable, at the moment, I mean, to my, surprise, I would say, a lot of Hindu farmers, right, seemed, I mean, because they're so desperate, right now, they seem to be actually open, kind of fairly open to the idea of, the slaughterhouses opening again, and they say that don't slaughter cows, but slaughter other cattle. So that is something that a lot of farmers are actually thinking about right now, because the government solution, right, the piecemeal solution that the government's come up with is setting up cow sheds or gaushalas, right? And the government's also, on a failed government effort attempt at, doing some cash transfer of 1,000 rupees a month, to farmers, getting cows registered. It hasn't really taken off on the ground at all. So while a section believes that, you set up cow shelters, shelters in every village, but I think a lot of people kind of acknowledge the fact that it's probably not a very sustainable idea in the long term, right? I mean, it's one thing to set up cow sheds, but to maintain them, with hundreds of cows, hundreds of animals in one shed, it's a difficult proposition, and people seem to be cognizant of that. So a lot of people, surprisingly, as I said, I mean, are kind of thinking that, maybe there is the solution actually lies in, the slaughterhouses, without hurting religious sentiments.
Remarkable. Let's see where that goes. The other thing, the other sort of material discussed that I think is important to discuss both for Uttar Pradesh but also for India overall is things like unemployment and Mehngai. We saw a couple of weeks back. In fact, we saw a remarkable and frightening sight of these railway exam candidates clashing with the police, setting trains on fire. What are the conversations around that? Are they going to affect uh, voting? Is there palpable and are people identifying their material distress with the government? How is that going down on the ground?
To an extent, yes. I mean, unemployment is definitely, unemployment is definitely something that people you get to hear about a lot. That there just aren't enough jobs compared to the previous regime. Government openings have been also fewer. So that is something that often comes in conversations. But inflation is actually a kind of while people do obviously complain about inflation, but a lot of people seem to think that the fact that the government is the government's the government's welfare programs, right? Distributing ration and and plus cash incentives of 6,000 a year for landed farmers, 1,000 for 1,000 a month for for farm laborers, and the fact that certain people believe that infrastructure has improved in Uttar Pradesh, roads, by which they essentially mean roads and bridges, right? So people argue, I mean, that a lot of people believe and contend that if those sorts of things require money, and there's also obviously another thing that people also bring up vaccines, right? That that the government is vaccinating the entire country for free. Where will the money come from? So those are the counter arguments that you hear to the subject of inflation, right? So the inflation, while I mean there is definitely anger over inflation, but I'd probably say that it doesn't probably rank as high as say the stray cattle issue, because people seem to rationalize
Interesting.
in a way that that if things are expensive, the government is also making an effort to give certain things for free, right? So the welfare schemes are a big hit among Uttar Pradesh's poor. The ration, particularly, the fact that people. I mean, one argument, one rationale or one line of thought, thinking that you often get to hear is if the times have been tough, the government has tried doing things to soften the blow, right? Most importantly, distributing rations, and there is a widespread consensus that the delivery of rations is better. The less leakage as compared to the previous regimes, and more people. You don't have to bribe. The kotedar, the local ration store owner, basically license holder, to give you rations. So yeah, I'd say that the general sentiment in vis-a-vis the welfare schemes that the government is running, these are actually not just Uttar Pradesh centric schemes. Right? The ration is like a nationwide. That the delivery of those welfare schemes has been better under this regime. So that is helping. That is, I think, offsetting a lot of the anger related to at least inflation.
Yeah, I think this is something that Arvind Subramaniam has called new welfareism. The fact that the BJP has, although ration actually is not an example of the bit, but it's something that maybe we miss out often in analysis. And of course, you've spoken about it plentiful in your reporting, Aruna, of the impact that welfare things like the 6,000 rupee farmer stipend, welfare, and even earlier things like maybe housing grants, the Pradhan Mantri
True,
Gram
true.
Awas
Yeah, that's a
Yojana.
big draw.
These are
That's a
all
big draw.
big things on the ground.
I happened to meet a woman in
That's a big draw. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've happened to meet a woman in Mirzapur who said that the only reason that she's going to vote for Modi, vote for Yogi Modi, is the fact that that she'd been hankering after officials to for a concrete house for years. I mean, she said that she'd worked when she was 9 months
Hmm.
pregnant because only to catch the attention of some official who would possibly take pity on her and grant her a house. Didn't happen, but it has happened under it has happened under the BJP. So there's this eternal gratitude for things like that, right? So yeah, that all of that really helps offset
Yeah.
anger. You know.
Yeah. I'd like to remind any new viewers that you're watching an analysis of the Uttar Pradesh elections. It's a special program on Scroll.in with me, Shoaib Daniel, as well as Aruna Satya, who's been traveling around the state. I'd also like to drop in a quick plea that if you want to keep the independent media functioning, you've got to do your bit. So please scoot over to Scroll.in/contribute and try and support Scroll.in, our reporting from the ground, the fact that we keep governments accountable. Uh, we'd like we'd like it if you could do your bit too. Getting back to what's helping the BJP in UP, something that you've explored in detail, Aruna. Law and order. It's something that you will hear
Correct.
Yogi talk about again and again and again. And this has a lot of facets. Why don't you tell us about why Yogi is batting on the front foot when it comes to law and order?
Absolutely. I mean, we've actually done a 5-part series on law and order in Uttar Pradesh. It's called Crime and Punishment. It's a detailed exposition of the government's claims that law and order has become better in the state in the last 5 years. Uh, going back to your question, uh, I mean, I think it's probably the most important plank this election for the BJP, right? Given that there is clear distress, economic distress, right? Uh, l- Again, the sentiment about law and order is in a lot of ways, similar to the sentiment about stray cattle. It's all encompassing. I mean, people support. I mean, people across the spectrum, right? People across the spectrum believe to a large extent that law and order has indeed become better in the last 5 years in Uttar Pradesh. Uh, when I investigated that claim, traveling across the state of Uttar Pradesh, I found, I mean, for starters, there is no data that says, law and order has become better in UP. But, data often, government data often hides more than it reveals. So it's difficult to go by government data on things like this. But there's definitely a perception on the ground that that things have become better. So what exactly has happened? So my reporting, I mean, I discovered, a few things in my reporting. One, the government the government has over the last 5 years gone hard on, Muslim mafias, Muslim strongmen politicians, right? Like Mukhtar Ansari, I mean, they've gone really hard after them, and in general, say, petty criminals, so what has happened in terms of law and order is, the nature of crime has changed in Uttar Pradesh to a large extent, right? I mean, we've seen it so many times, like people being lynched in the name of, cow, love jihad, I mean, all sorts of police excesses and vigilante action in the name of love jihad and cow slaughter. But simultaneously, the police also seems to have, clamped down on, street level crime, like, which used to be, according to people, endemic in the state under the Samajwadi Party government. Or coming back from, I mean, something that you get to hear often. Like, a Muslim journalist in Muzaffarnagar told me that, he every day he has to come back from work at 10 in the evening and, go back home, which is a village, 30 kilometers off. So he admitted that, it was much, he felt much safer, going back, through those, narrow lanes in his village. uh, so this stems from, the feeling or the perception that, petty crime has decreased. I mean, you can't get away, say, looting a person in the street, or like snatching a chain, or, lifting a bike from off the streets. All of that seems to have, the scale of all of that seems to have come down. Having said that, it's not just vigilante crime that continues to that's thrived on this government. I mean, apart from the fact that dissent's being crushed, which is a new kind of criminal. The state has made has conjured a new kind of criminal. But apart from that, in eastern Uttar Pradesh, a lot of this upper caste and particular Thakur, strong men, right? Continue to, rule over them, their empires, built on, allegedly built on criminal activity. So there is definitely, I mean, the so unfortunately, this whole law thing is in a certain way also in a way a dog whistle, for kind of putting Muslims in their place. It seeks into deeper, more deep-seated prejudices in society, that, certain communities or certain religions are more prone to, doing criminal activities. So that's why, that is why the Adityanath government, and Adityanath in particular, keeps, raking up the issue over and over again, rally after rally, because, it is in a way, in a way, also a dog whistle of sorts, right? Of saying that, here there were these Muslim boys, doing, bad antisocial things. We've shown them their place. So, that's how, I mean, that's how these two things come together. The idea of law and order, calmness on the streets, calm on the streets, and, other the BJP's bigger calling card, the Hindutva.
It's a good mesh for from the BJP's
Right.
point of view, an effective form of politics. I'm just going
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
quickly segue off from that Muslim point. So Muslim politics is obviously seeing a bit of a churn. after the coming of the BJP, because the BJP, as some analysts have called it, they follow a form of -20 politics, where they don't even try and solicit Muslim votes many of the times.
True.
So in that sort of scenario, I mean, the biggest repository of Muslim votes till now in UP has been the Samajwadi Party. But as you've written in your reporting, the Samajwadi Party is treading a bit gingerly when it
Right.
comes to its quote unquote Muslimness. So what have you seen from the ground from Muslim voters with respect to both the BJP coming up as well as the SP not being Muslim enough?
Right. Yeah. I mean, as you correctly mentioned, the Samadhi party has been residue trying to shed its so-called Muslim image, right? I mean, it's analysts and observers say that they have no choice but to cornered by BJP's belligerent Hindutva. If they have to get Hindu votes, in a two-way contest, right? It's no longer a three-way contest. They need the Hindu votes. A substantial amount of non-Yadav Hindu votes. So they have to kind of, endure or whatever, make them more palatable to, those communities. This has obviously not gone unnoticed, by Muslims, Akhilesh going to temples, Uh, the Muslim in Uttar Pradesh finds themselves obviously in a bit of a tight spot right now, right? I mean, they obviously feel as a Muslim man. I mean, I've just come back from Badayu, and we'll probably have a report from Badayu, which is 25% Muslims, and higher than the state average. So yeah, it's obviously not got unnoticed. But there's given the fact that for example, in Muzaffarnagar, right, which is again like a lot of Muslims, significant Muslim population in Muzaffarnagar, but the BJP is gone. Sorry, the SP has gone only with Hindu candidates. So it's not gone down well with a certain section of Muslims, and actually predates the ticket distribution. But because they believe that I mean, it's important to cultivate a Muslim leadership, and the Samadhi party seems to be doing the exact opposite of it. But I suppose a lot of Muslims also believe, like as an old man told me, in Badayu, it's bewkufi, it's foolishness to vote for any other party at the moment. Those battles will be fought later. You know, so I do expect a substantial. I mean, these things are difficult to predict, but I do expect a substantial Muslim consolidation in the SP's favor in the coming elections, which does not necessarily mean that that Muslim voters are voting for Samadhi party because they think that they're the best option for them. Right now they do, but young Muslims particularly do seem to be restless and kind of looking for options. Who would, let's say, not be apologetic about catering to Muslim interests. So and it's very important for Samadhi party. This is crucial, right? Like a fragmentation in Muslim votes. This election will be catastrophic for the party. You know, so this is going to. So I think that the Samajwadi Party is trying to walk a tightrope. So it remains to be seen, but my sense is that yeah, despite this quiet, the lot of that's palpable among a lot of Muslims, particularly young Muslims, the Samajwadi Party is probably going to, status quo is going to, remain. Samajwadi Party is probably going to snare, very large, share the Muslim vote.
Cool. Thank you so much, Arunab. I think we'll now go to Q&A. We've got a couple of questions that our viewers have dropped in for Arunab. Uh, Another reminder, if you think Scroll is doing a good job reporting from the ground, we urge you to go to scroll.in/contribute and contribute whatever you can to keep to help us do what we do and to keep us running, to keep us open, to help keep the government to account. Uh, the first question we'll go to is from Amit Kumar, who asks, who first has some kind words for Arunab. He's been following Arunab's insightful ground reports.
Sure, makes sense.
His question is there any substantial decline in support for the BJP in any community except Jats? In fact, this is, I guess, the larger question over here is, Arunab, that the BJP maybe came to power with a lot of OBC support, the small, chotu OBC communities. And will the BJP be able to maintain that support in this election? It's a big question, but what are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. Um, Let me put it this way. I mean, I don't think there's very palpable resentment against the BJP among communities which supported the BJP, right? Primarily because they don't think the Samajwadi Party represents their interests any better than the BJP does. Uh, having said that, a lot of a lot of OBC voters I've spoken to, seemed more favorably disposed towards voting for the opposition in constituencies and seats where they have candidates not just from their own communities but also from parties, representing their own communities, right? In Badaयूं, for instance, in a particular seat called Bilsi, the Sapagudi party has gone with a candidate from the Mahan Dal, which is essentially a Maurya or a Shakya, which is an intermediary OBC, community. Uh, uh, it caters to their interests. So there I came across a lot of Maurya and Shakya voters who seemed more open to the idea of voting for the alliance. And among other communities, this is again like a bit of one of those political questions, which no one really knows the answers to, is Dalit support. Because this is, narrative that Dalits have been voting for the BJP, not just, a last section of non-Jatav Dalits, but also a section of Jatav Dalits have been voting for the BJP in recent elections.
Mm-hmm.
And I do sense I do sense some disillusionment among Dalit communities with the BJP. Primarily because they believe that the BJP has not been able to fulfill the aspiration part of the mandate that they were voted in for. So I think that remains to be seen. But having said that, a lot of these communities do not think that the primary contender to the BJP at the moment, the Samajwadi Party, represents their interest any better than the BJP.
Got it. And is there, like you spoke of Dalit voters, is the fact that seemingly the BSP is not very strong in this election playing a factor in Dalit indecision?
Uh, Probably to a very small extent. I mean, this again goes back to like historic reasons, right? The Dalits are not, I mean, Samajwadi Party is not really, let's say, a natural choice for a lot of Dalit voters, right? Because of historic reasons. So the Samajwadi Party has been trying to, I mean, it realizes the importance of, drawing Dalit voters. They've been trying hard. They've been getting a lot of Dalit leaders, ex-BSP leaders, civil society leaders to kind of, support them, and have also, kind of given them, designations and posts within the party structure, but as I said, it's not a very natural refuge for Dalit voters, the Samajwadi Party.
Yeah, true. I mean, this is a problem that the Samajwadi Party faces. It's been a 30% party at max in UP, and
True.
it needs to at least, I think, be a 40% party to challenge the BJP this time, or to at least win the election. So yeah. The next question is from Proma Rai Chaudhary, who's basically, I think it's a two-part question, Arunav, is whether there is a generational factor when it comes to when it comes to voting are like older jats, voting differently from younger jats and so on? And is there a gender preference? Have you seen women of a household going one way and the men of the household going the other?
I take the first one first, right? Generational divide in voting.
Yeah.
I suppose only natural. I mean, obviously, young people. I mean, are more restless. I mean, they're increasingly growing restless about the fact that the economy is not doing well, and where are the jobs? And as somebody told me, it's great. We build a temple, we'll go there. When we're in Banaras and in Ayodhya, we'll go visit the temple. But where the hell are the jobs? So obviously, the many young people, particularly, as I said, a lot of Dalit youths, I've been meeting who were not happy with, the government. I mean, that they believe that the government just hasn't been able to, create enough employment avenues, right? There's a lot of this, in Basti, for instance, I met, I met people, Dalit men who were essentially, essentially work as migrant laborers in Surat, Delhi, and all sorts of places because they were very taken with the fact that Modi had said that, that you don't have to go out to work, um, and even Bundelkhand, right? So Modi had said that we'll make it like Bhuj, there will be industries, and none of that has really come up or happened in Uttar Pradesh. So yeah, a lot of the young people are definitely, uh, disappointed by the lack of, employment, enough employment. Uh, so yeah, I probably one could say that probably younger people are but that's again a tricky question. It kind of like inverts a little, and say not necessarily entirely in like Jat areas, right, where the young people are probably more, the BJP is more palatable to younger Jats than the older lot who still put their weight behind RLD, courtesy their allegiance to Chaudhry Charan Singh. So this is, I don't think, a very fine line. I mean, I think there's a very, fine divide, yeah, or a clean cut between old and the young, to be honest. And I don't think there is. I don't quite see a possible gender gap, to be honest. Not really, to be honest.
Cool. We'll go to a final question from Rikit Shahi. Uh, this is a sort of uh, regional question for UP, West UP question. Uh, Again, the media perception is largely that it's a bipolar contest in West UP, uh, which would be beneficial to the Samajwadi Party if that were to happen. But the BSP has traditionally been pretty strong in West UP. So do you see it playing a part? And especially, I think again, we're going to have, I think, the Muslim factor come in. Muslims have voted traditionally for the BSP in large numbers in West UP. But
In
are they
recent
going
times,
to
yes.
switch this time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, mm, uh, yeah. So yeah, I mean, in fact, thank you, Ricky, for this. I mean, I actually kind of go into this question in my Saharanpur dispatch, which is a lot of Dalits and Dalit stronghold, right? The B I think I'd say that it is a bipolar contest for sure, but the BSP is definitely a factor, and it's the most visible in Saharanpur, where, as you very rightly point out, ticket distribution, there is this quiet among Muslims over SP's ticket distribution, and the BSP is definitely going to play a factor, So, I mean, I would not be. I mean, I mean, let's be honest about this. It's not like BSP is going to end up with no seats. The BSP is definitely going to win like at least I mean, well, let's not put a number, but yeah, they'll definitely win seats. So the BSP is definitely is not a non-entity in this election at all, by no means. By no stretch of imagination.
Great. Thank you so much. That's all we have time for today on the special Scroll.in broadcast around the Uttar Pradesh elections with our reporter Arunab Saikia, who's who spent a lot of time and effort crisscrossing the state. I'd like to end with another reminder that to help keep the news free, to help keep the news relevant to you, to help keep the news, to help keep yourself at the center of news and to hold governments to account, you need to support good reporting. You need to support independent news media. So I would urge you to go over to scroll.in/contribute and contribute anything that you're comfortable with. This is Shoaib Danial with Arunab Saikia signing off. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Arunab.